Okay, so in terms of my introduction, I think you've done a great job. It's just important to know that I've done this full time for 36 years. I work with on the average of 71, 72 wonderful people every week. And I have a PhD and I have a DC. One thing that's interesting to me is that I've learned, and I hope we can kind of just go through this together, that most of us are at what I call a defining moment. And a defining moment is where, think about this psychologically, you have decades that go by in your life and nothing happens. Things just seem to be the same. And then there's that moment where all of a sudden it's as if decades come together and happen. And many of us are going through that right now. And what I've learned is that to negotiate these decades, you've got to open your mind up. You've got to clear your mind so that you can receive what we call an epiphany, or if you're spiritually inclined, inspiration, so you can get what you need to get, and then you need to act on that within 24 to 72 hours. Because if you don't act, then what's going to happen is things are going to stay the same and you're not going to benefit from that defining moment. So, what I'm going to do tonight for the next hour, however long we're together, is I want to help give us a little bit of a push, right? Things in motion, stay in motion. That's great. Appreciate Newton for that. However, things that aren't moving tend to not get moving unless we help them along a little bit. So I'm going to help us all along a little bit. And then we can answer questions at the end. The first thing is we have to wrestle with the question of how important is this thing we call success? Now, if you look at the right of the screen here, you see this U-Haul and you see a hearse. Typically, what people say is, I've never seen that happening. I've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. In other words, you can't take it with you. And I agree with that 100% when you're dead. But until then, I've done research. And the research shows that everything we do in life and every person we care about is going to either be positively impacted by our success or negatively if we don't succeed. Now, this is interesting because it mushrooms out to, it's multi-generational. When you see people who are succeeding, we're thrilled for them. When you see them suffering, we hurt for them. So let's just take a little bit of time and make sure we're on the same page. You're going to have to define success. I'm going to give you some suggestions, but if you don't come up with your own definition, that you're not going to have the oomph that you need to be able to make it happen. So we start with meaningful or purpose-driven work. Now, the reason for that is we talk a lot about longevity, and I'm going to talk about that when we get to purpose, but there are very few things that we can do in life that will improve our quality of life and our quantity as much as having a reason to get to bed early, a reason to get up early, and something meaningful to do during the day. Volumes are written on this. Volumes. As much money as they're making right now trying to get us to retire, there's actually a bunch of people who are saying, been there, done that, didn't work out the way I thought. I need to re-engage again. So we'll talk about that. The next one is meaningful or healthy relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The best physical, emotional, and spiritual health possible. There are people in your group that are much more qualified to talk on those issues, but I will address a few of them. True peace of mind, and then genuine self-worth and self-esteem. Now, there's a difference between the two here. Self-worth is how you view yourself as a person. In other words, many people, like the Coveys or the people I consider to be phenomenal minds, say that comes from your relationship with God. Self-esteem is different. That's your ability to set and accomplish a goal. But the interesting thing is they're both interconnected. In other words, if your self-worth goes in the toilet, what's the likelihood of you feeling confident that you're going to be able to accomplish your goals? Very low. And then money. Money is interesting. We need to have a great standard of living. There's a lot of people right now in all forms of medicine that are wondering if the return on investment was worth it. get out of debt, and prepare for semi-retirement. So what I say is we all take a test. And a test is this, it's called the rule of tens. So all of us need to look at this definition and say, okay, if I keep doing what I'm doing right now, where will I be in 10 minutes? Well, we'll all be here with Dr. Clearfield, right? This is our group. How about 10 months? Maybe I need to think about these things. What about 10 years? Now, the interesting thing is psychologically, people can handle 10 months. Excuse me, they can handle 10 minutes. At 10 months, they start to get a little nervous. At 10 years, that's when they start making the hard decisions. Now, there's a reason for this. And the reason is the most productive step, yet it's the most painful we can take, is to go from deniable awareness to undeniable awareness. Now, when that happens, why is this thing not clicking? Oh, we have to face the facts. Here are the facts. See these two pictures here? The one on the left is what we call the chains of physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, and relationship despair. That's with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The guy on the right, this is called the physical, emotional, and spiritual and financial blessing of freedom. The interesting thing is, because of the data, it's kind of hard to find a middle point. It goes one or two ways. Either we feel shackled in chains, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or we feel free. Now let's look at some data about what these chains do to us. According to WebMD, whether you agree with them or not, one thing that they point out is that 75 to 90% of all doctor visits have a stress component. Now, my data shows that in particular, that stress component is often financial. It's often financial. Spiritually, when we're financially stressed, we don't focus on God. We're focused on putting bread, butter on the bread, in other words, our money. Our marriage health, interestingly, Business Insider said marriage is the number one thing that people argue about. Now, I disagree with this a little bit because we don't argue directly about the money. What happens is when you're under the gun financially, it doesn't bring out the best in anybody. It brings out the worst in most of us. So our arguments may be over, did you fill the car up with gas? Or what about making dinner? Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But the root of it is this chronic financial stress. Psychology today comes in and says, I'm going to do you a solid. Financial stress is one of the most common causes of divorce. The mental health people then got joined in with Forbes magazine, and they said there's an undeniable connection between financial stress, anxiety, depression, and a decrease in cognitive function because it kills your self-worth and it kills your self-esteem. So Friedrich Nietzsche said something interesting, right? We're going to move on and we're going to be positive, but he said the reason we struggle with this is because sometimes people just don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. So what's the illusion? Never seen a hearse pull in a U-Haul. Get it, but not while you're alive. So let's go right deep. This is the let's get dirty section. We need to listen to Stephen Covey. I want you to pay attention to the three trees on the right. Covey said, and Covey was brilliant, he said, you got to look at life like a large yellow tree. I want you to really look at this and think about what you would do. Now, from a psychology perspective, most of us, what we do is we go down to Sherwin-Williams, we get a can of natural green paint, we paint over the leaves, and we call it good. That's the middle graphic. See the leaves? Green. But then what happens is the tree dies. That's to the right. The reason the tree dies is because the problem was never at the leaves. The problem was at the roots. What we did is we applied cover-up psychology. In other words, Whatever it is that's at the root, and I'm going to show you some of the common ones, those are the symptoms. Everything above that, physical, emotional, spiritual, and your relationships, your money, the way your practice is ultimately an expression of something either positively or negatively found at our roots. Now, here's what I say. After doing this for 36 years, I love it. See this picture over here on the right with the roots? If I find at somebody's root level, they have a resilient or an iron will. You take a look at things generationally, and many of us are benefiting from parents and grandparents that had experiences that developed this resilient or this iron will, a cheery demeanor, a resolute purpose, a solid work ethic, and enthusiasm. Now, the reason enthusiasm is important is because from a receiver's perspective, enthusiasm is energy. People buy energy. Now, what do I often find at the root? So I want you to look at these graphics. See these little roots right here? They go deep. This is what I hope I find. This is what I often find. Now look at these roots. These are roots that we all stumble over, right? You can't walk over those roots. You'd have to hop over them. It's tough to get over them because they're so big. Here's what I find: physical health problems, emotional health problems, spiritual health problems, or financial health problems. Okay, now that's what I often find. Here's what I always find. Now, what you need to know is this list goes on for page after page after page. But I thought tonight, let's just focus on four. Four that will make a difference in your practices Monday morning. I call these are the capacity blocks to our success that have to be removed: purpose, connection, relationships, and burnout. So let's talk about purpose. We have a major problem. There are lots of people that are saying, on the deathbed, nobody talks about work. They all talk about family, they talk about faith, and they talk about friends. I think it's a big mistake. It is a huge mistake to increase the value of faith, family, and friends by decreasing the value of work. Now, the interesting thing is Viktor Frankl, we've all studied him, said something that I find profound. He said the greatest tragedy in life is not suffering. The greatest tragedy is living without meaning. Meaning. Now, how do we figure out what our meaning is? The interesting thing is, it's also the secret to success. And that is to determine exactly what God wants you to do, accept it, and do exactly that. Now, my suggestion is we don't overthink it. God gave every single person in our group talents, abilities, and skills that he wants us to use to finance our people. That becomes our assignment. Now, the reason an assignment is important is because it gives us strength beyond our own. Now, a great example of that is the leader of your group, Bill Clearfield. I have studied him as long as he's been on this program. This guy can accomplish more than most people could accomplish because he is on an assignment. He has a strength that makes him a nationwide lecturer, helps him build the Clearfield training program where he helps other people with all his information, and helps him have a thriving practice where he specializes on things that are very difficult to treat because he has a strength greater than his own. So if you study the Clearfields of the world, it's interesting. They all say the same thing. I know who I am. I know what I'm here to do. I refuse to be distracted or quit, and I insist on being successful. Now let's move over to Covey. Sadly, he died just before I believe he was 80 years old. The reason he died was he was riding a bike, fell, hit his head, and then everything went downhill from there, as we all know. But what you need to know is at almost 80 years old, here is a guy who had more money than he could spend in multiple lifetimes that was absolutely absent of duplicity. And I know this because I've been to his house. I knew his daughter, and the things he taught, he lived. He said, if you have, put your name in here. If Jim Naccarato has significant purpose and meaning to his life, it will strengthen his immune system and give him an extra 20 years of life. Interesting, and we're going to talk about this as we get deeper into it. We're all trying to do the right stuff, taking our vitamins, doing our exercise, getting good medical care, whatever it is. But yet we take a look at the people who are driven by purpose, driven by meaning, and they tend to be the ones that last the longest and have the highest quality of life. So purpose is key. The next thing is connection. Now, I want to show you some different data plates and explain to you what I mean by connection. 87.5, the SRI is Stanford Research Institute. They said 87.5% of all the money any of us make comes from how we deal with people. They said only 12.5% comes from what we know. Then there was a study done where they determined that most patients think most doctors are equally trained. So they gave 8 out of 10 points to bedside manner. Carmen Simone, who's a PhD in neuroscience, neuropsychology, this is her gig. She tries to figure out, okay, how does this all come together? And she said every single one of us is making decisions out of what we call the memory portion of our brain. So I have to make a decision. I go to the memory portion of my brain and I look at what's there. And the people who succeed find a way to be unforgettable in the memory portion of the brain. Now, I've studied this and I wondered, okay, what does it mean to be unforgettable? Well, according to Carmen and according to my research, it means you make a connection. You make a connection. So if you go to PubMed and you look at it, they will say a strong doctor-patient connection is the foundation of practice success. Data shows it drives higher treatment adherence, patient retention, and profitability due to consistent patient loyalty. And bonus, they say it leads to fewer hospitalizations and fewer malpractice lawsuits. So my study then is, being the psychology guy, is that why people say they have the best MD or the best DO? Because they feel connected? Is that why they say they have the best surgeon? Well, I've actually looked at the research on that, and they compare the busier surgeon with the less busy surgeon, and the determining factor between the two is the best or the busiest surgeon is better at dealing with all the people in the operating room, the schedulers, everybody involved. The less busy, unless you're talking about picking tumors out of somebody's head or something serious, is the one who blows off the people that he's involved with, or she. Same thing for the best hospital. We have a huge increase now in hospital patient connection. Many people who go to the hospital are leaving and get a phone call, or they get a card or something trying to establish connection. Same thing with dentistry, psychology, and chiropractic. So here's the thing about connection. Regardless of the state you practice in, the city you practice in, the location, your equipment, that technique or your approach to patients, the products you sell, the software you use, if you focus on doctor-patient connection, it means you've got to lessen your focus on technology and increase your focus on personal touch. You will increase your success. If you don't, you won't increase your success, or if you do, it will be temporary. Now, I want you to look at this. This is a very important plate. On the left, we have air traffic controllers. I want you to think about connection. They use a radar to decide about distance, direction, and velocity. In other words, how do we keep people safe? Humans have a radar. See this girl on the right? Where they are trying to figure us out. Specifically, they're trying to figure out if they feel connected to us. Now, I've done the research. This is interesting. The research is most people in a seminar setting say, now 90% of all healthcare decisions in the United States are made by women, according to the American Medical Association. Predominantly, most financial decisions are either yes or no by women. So a lot of the research is done on females. Females in a seminar setting will say, it takes me 7 to 8 minutes to decide if I'm feeling connection. 7 to 8 minutes. Then a woman will raise her hand and say, no, I can tell in 5 minutes. Then a woman will raise her hand and say, no, 3 minutes for me. Then another woman, now we're getting to the honesty, will raise her hand and say it takes a minute. And then somebody will say, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I can tell the minute the doctor walks in the door whether we're connected or not. It's because of this radar. Now, in that radar, they're looking for two things. One is called the law of accumulation. Do I do what I do to get what I need to get? Right? So the law of accumulation, I'm going to practice, recommend whatever it is to get what I need to get. When I do that, my stress goes up, my practice goes down, and my income goes down. The law of contribution is I do what I do to give to people what they need to be given. In that point, the stress goes down, the practice goes up, and the income goes up. Now, I've interviewed these people. They can sense this, like I said, instantaneously. They will say things like, oh, that was a racket, or that doctor didn't even think through or listen to me, or they didn't look at my material before I got here. They were totally clueless, or they kind of fumbled their way through this thing, trying to reconnect again because they didn't care enough to prepare before they saw me. Now, if we had time, I would take you to Stanford, because Stanford Medical School is now saying, whoa, we need to stop. We've got to prepare with intention before we go into every visit. What they're doing is they're teaching their medical school students, you've got to live in the law of contribution if you're going to be successful. Now, I've studied people who do this, and there are basically 4 things that they do with a singular goal. The first one is their personal life is in order. That makes sense, doesn't it? If my personal life is not in order, the likelihood of me living in the law of contribution goes way down. Things are out of control. I'm going to focus on accumulating, get what I need to get. The second thing is, and this is a little bit spiritual, don't mean to offend anybody, but I have to be truthful. These people get on their knees and pray for a better heart, a better brain, and a better heart. They ask God to help them in the middle of all their stresses to have the right kind of heart. Now, I watched an interview with a current resident, a recent resident, and he said the demands of medical school, the demands of an internship, the demands of residency are so high now that if you're doing it for the money, don't do it. There are other ways to make money. You have to do it for the good you're going to provide other people. Now, these people pray for a better brain and a better heart. Now, I can tell you for many, many, many years, I didn't think this was possible, but I've actually received this. I've had a situation in my life that was so challenging that I tried as hard as I could to change my thinking and my heart, and I couldn't. But then I was blessed, and it was like a miracle. It happened overnight. The next thing you do is you get on your feet and you do your part to answer your prayer, to answer those prayers, and then be open to the people that God will send you to help you. Now, why? because this is the root of success. We create a community of people who believe in what we're doing, that value our services, and are experiencing connection. The next thing we need to talk about relationships. And I want to get to the white hot imperative and burnout because that's critical. But I want you to read this statement. We don't rise to the level of what we hope to achieve. We fall to the level of our marriages or our relationships. Now, where does this come from? Is this just a psychobabble idea? No. Sean Aker out of Harvard, you should look him up, was absolutely captivated by 200 studies, scientific studies on 275,000 people. I can't even imagine that many people. He proved that happiness precedes success. It doesn't follow it. It's the engine that drives it. And in nearly every aspect of life, so that applies to our practices. Sean Aker. The interesting thing is in psychology, we say 85 to 90% of your happiness comes from your closest interpersonal relationships, marriage, significant others, whatever it is that gets in your heart, that's driving 85 to 90% of your success. Now, this is where I think that Freud got a bad rap. Because Freud was brilliant. He was trying to organize the human mind. But another thing that he was trying to do is to figure out why this relationship exerts so much power on us. It's almost incalculable what men will do for women in relationships and what women will do for men in relationships. Now, my data, what I did is I looked at trips. You take a good trip, you go away with your spouse, you have a wonderful time. Let's say it's a honeymoon. It's like a honeymoon for a week. You go away, you come back, the plane ride was great, the food was great, everything was wonderful. You come home, the babysitter doesn't even charge you because they say, man, that was the best experience I've ever had. And then you go to work on Monday. Now, you go to work on Monday and you work up a new patient with three objectives. You want them to stay. You want them to stay. You want them to pay your services.
Okay.
And we need to, what's that? Somebody talking? Oh, and we need them to refer, right? I just watched a thing on concierge programs, medical programs, concierge doctors. It's grown 83% since 2023 because people are moving. They want to move more to direct patient contact. So what happens is then you take that trip, you go to work, and I've asked in seminars, and this is almost a no-brainer, after that trip, you work up a patient on Monday, what's the likelihood of them staying, paying, and referring? Almost without exception, people say about 100%. Then I say, let's flip the trip. Horrible trip. Horrible trip. Bad flight, bad food, you get food poisoning, bad flight home, babysitter charges you triple because your kids were so bad. And then you go to work on Monday to work up a new patient. Now, as hard as you try and leave that out of the office, what's the likelihood of that patient staying, paying, and referring? Almost without exception, people say about zero. Now, the interesting thing is, and I've studied this, we didn't change buildings. We didn't change our approach to healthcare. We didn't change staff. We didn't change any scripts. We didn't introduce any procedures. What changed? We changed. Now, I'm going to give you 5 suggestions to help with this very important practice building concept. I was at lunch with the Lundgrens. The Lundgrens are extremely well-known writers on marriage and family therapy. Joy asked me, knowing what I do, knowing my psychology background, Jim, what do you think the number one indicator of a successful marriage or relationship is? Well, I went into the typical psychological stuff: love, kindness, forgiveness, generosity, And she looked at me and she said, Jim, all good, but you're missing a big point. I said, what's the big point? She said, commitment. People who succeed in their marriages or their relationships are committed. And because of that commitment, they can handle all those other things. You can have those other things, but without commitment, they don't carry the punch. We need to increase our commitment in our relationships. The next one is they have to stay equally matched. Now, this one creates a bit of conflict because a lot of people go, well, wait a minute. We have a horrible divorce rate statistic in professional programs, whether they're medical, osteopathic, psychological, law, chiropractic. We have a horrible divorce rate. And the reason for that is you have a practitioner or a becoming practitioner that is on a rapid growth path. You have a spouse that's often not on a similar growth path. Doesn't mean they need to become doctors, but it does mean they need to grow together, or they either outgrow you or you outgrow them. Now, when you outgrow them, it's interesting because these relationships don't fall apart because of a lack of love. They fall apart because of lack of connection. Connection. We keep coming back to connection. What happens when you lose connection, you get contempt. In psychology, we call it the hard eye roll. And when that happens and people get divorced, which almost always happens emotionally first, physically second, what they do is they live as married singles, sometimes for decades. And I've done the research on this. It is alarming how many people are sleeping in separate bedrooms because it creates psychological distance so they don't have to deal with their issues. So, number one, you got to stay committed. You got to ratchet up your commitment. Number two, you have to be equally matched. Number three, you need to make life easier for each other. Now, in our last Tahoe seminar, we spent a lot of time on this. And in September, we're going to spend more time on this because it affects everything. It's getting out of the leaves, getting down to the trunk, getting into the roots, and making a big difference in our success. We need to make life easier for each other by doing 3 things a day. Now, these 3 things a day don't have to be big. It can be something like loading the dishwasher, putting clothes into the washing machine, sweeping the floor, filling up a tank or a tank full of gas. The interesting thing about that is on the receiving end, those things will be noticed, but the big bang for the buck is on the giving end. If I do 3 nice things for Kim every single day, she may see some of them and it means a big difference for her, but the biggest change is going to be in me. I'm now going to change my orientation towards her. The 4th thing is you need to figure out what their love language is so you can do 3 things every single day so that they feel loved. Now, that takes some exploring, but if you just ratchet up your commitment, keep growing, make life easier for each other, and make sure each person feel loved, you're way ahead of the game. Now, I want to talk to you about chicken wings and fruit baskets. We're going to go into a little bit of psychotherapy here for a minute. Okay, Larry Miller, I want you to really pay attention to this, was building the Utah Jazz. When he was building them, he only had so much money. Now, this guy's a mega wealthy guy, but he only had so much money to be able to dedicate to salaries. He put together the team, and then there were 2 guys that would complete it, would make it one of the best professional basketball teams out there. They matched, he told them how much he could pay them. They accepted the salaries, but then they had their agent go in and talk to Larry and say, we will take your terms. However, basketball player number 1 wants chicken wings in his hotel room after every game. Basketball player number 2 wants a fruit basket in his hotel room after every game. Larry Miller was spent. No way am I going to give chicken wings and a fruit basket at the end of every single game. So then he went in and he laid on his hotel bed and he sat there and he thought about it. He said, am I going to lose? This is one of the reasons why he could pick his battles, why he was so wealthy. Am I going to lose the best team I could possibly put together because of chicken wings, because of a fruit basket? So he called the manager guy in and he said, done. I will provide chicken wings at the end of every game for this player and a fruit basket for the other player. Now, why do we talk about that? Most relationships fall apart because of chicken wings and fruit baskets. In other words, because of the principle of magnification, we make small things big enough to justify leaving. Whereas what we really need to do is ratchet up our commitment, stay equally matched, make life easier for each other, 3 things a day, make sure they feel loved based on their love language, 3 things a day, and then make sure you do not get caught up in chicken wings or fruit baskets. In today's vernacular, it's going to be something like, this isn't a hill it's worth dying on. Now, the interesting thing that we have here is we have a lot of people that are in marriages with a lot of kids and grandkids and all this other stuff that's going on. There was a great movie that had Billy Crystal in it. It was called Parental Guidance. It had Bette Midler in it, and it had Marissa Tomei. So Billy Crystal's the dad, Bette Midler's the mom, Marissa Tomei is the daughter. Marissa Tomei is talking to her mom, and she said, Mom, I don't understand. It's like, what don't you understand? She said, why do you always take Dad's side? And Marissa Tomei, as the mom, looked at the daughter and said, because he's the one who stays. He's the one who stays. So what we need to do, increase our commitment, stay equally matched in growth. Doesn't mean to be the same profession, but we both need to be growing or we're going to outgrow each other, make life easier for each other, feel loved, get out of the chicken wing and fruit basket, and keep that husband and wife relationship the top priority in your life. Now let's talk about burnout. This is where I know that Clearfield really wanted us to spend some time on this. I want you to look at burnout in the context of a white hot imperative. I want you to look at the graphic on the right. The graphic on the right represents a reservoir. There's a bunch of water in there. But the water's going down, so we have a source of water that will replenish it. That source of water draws from what we call reserves. So in burnout, I'm talking frank psychological burnout. You experience physical, emotional, mental exhaustion. Exhaustion. Now, let's talk about functional reserves. We have extra God-given resources. They're called reserves in the human body that help us adapt and change to various stimuli. Most of us are seeing that stimuli in terms of age-related changes, injuries, or diseases. Now, from a brain perspective, we have a cognitive functional reserve. The buzzword for right now is neuroplasticity, right? Not only can we draw on part of the brain that maybe we were not tapping into, but the brain has this ability to adapt and recover when it's had issues. You may not know this, but the heart has what's called a cardiac functional reserve. That is now termed cardiac plasticity. The lungs have a pulmonary functional reserve. That's called pulmonary plasticity. The kidneys, renal functional reserve, renal plasticity, and the liver has a hepatic functional reserve. We call that hepatic plasticity. Now, this is common. You talk to an ER doctor, they're seeing people at their worst, they will tell you We've got to start building our reserves. Health is rooted in reserve management. So when life comes along and you have age-related changes, injuries, or diseases, you have reserves to draw on. But nobody talks about the psychological functional reserves. That's where the burnout comes in. That's our ability to adapt and change to stress or burnout. And we also don't talk about the spiritual functional reserves, which is our ability to adapt and change to also stress and burnout. So let's look at how we manage our psychological, if we don't manage them, our psychological and our spiritual functional reserves. What happens? If I don't manage those, what happens? What happens is you end up with the four success or practice building killer fatigues. If you do not manage these, listen to the ER doctor. You got to start managing your functional reserves. So when you get in trouble, you've got something to draw on. If you don't do that, you end up with what's called resilience fatigue. In other words, Jim Naccarato does not manage those reserves. He's going to end up like a worn out soldier. No gas in the tank. If I don't manage these reserves, I'll go into relationship fatigue. The problem with that is all of our success is dependent on the number of relationships we can handle. Doctor-patient relationships. If you don't manage that, you go into people fatigue. People fatigue is the shopping cart syndrome. Jim Naccarato is walking through the grocery store. He's going down an aisle. He sees somebody and he goes, nope, turns the cart around, goes down another aisle. Now, the interesting thing is most of us have done this. And then we end up with compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is interesting because it's not just for other people, it's also for ourselves. Now, if you were to pull all four of these together, what you end up is what we call resilience depletion. Resilience depletion. Now, most people, when you interview them, you say, how are you doing with this? How many does it take for me to be in resilience depletion? The honest answer is just one. But when you interview people, they go, well, I'm good, man. I'm good. And then I have to come in and say, no, this is just your new normal. Ask somebody who loves you. Now, why is this? Sorry, I get so excited about this because this is such a big deal. Why is this important from a practice building perspective? Because moods are transferred. We share emotions because of what we call mirror neurons. Now, not just mirror neurological neurons, but we kind of look at it as emotional as well. Our mind is hardwired to connect to the hardwiring in the mind of another person. People say, I don't believe you. I say, okay, I get that. Just tell me this. How do you feel when you're with somebody who's anxious? They say, I feel anxious. How do you feel when you're with somebody who's depressed? They say, I feel depressed. I say, how do you feel with somebody who has marriage problems or relationship problems? They say, I feel the tension. Then I say, have you ever walked into a room where somebody's been in an argument, you didn't know it, but you felt it when you walked in the room? Almost 100% of the people say, absolutely. So what do we know? Psychology tells us success is a transfer or sharing of enthusiasm, because enthusiasm is energy. People buy energy. A lack of success is commonly the result of transferring and sharing resilience depletion. So I want you to consider a visual. Now, I'm going to morph this quote a little bit to fit what we're talking about. I want you to look at the quote and I want you to embrace the visual. The quote is this: fatigue is the common enemy of all of us. So slow down, rest up, replenish, and refill. It's a quote by Jeffrey R. Holland. I add to that, when you think about fatigue, I want you to think about resilience depletion. So look at these three gauges. The one on the left shows what happens to Jim Naccarato when his reserves are depleted. The one in the middle shows when Jim Naccarato needs to replenish reserves. Oh, hey, Bill, somebody talking?
I think
Can you
somebody
hear
was
that?
on, but I think you're okay now.
Okay, all
I
right,
took
good.
care of
Can
it.
you hear me all right?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay. The one on the right is when my reserves are at the ideal. So I want you to look at this. When my reserves are depleted, I want you to think about your new patients. I want you to think about adhering to treatment protocol, completion of treatment protocol, and the money you make. What do you think the likelihood is of me building a successful practice if my reserves are depleted? Look at the gauge. Now, when my reserves need to be replenished, I want you to look at the middle gauge. That's at about a half a tank. And the reason for that is most activities that we're going to talk about will give you about a half a tank bump. So if you wait till you're empty and then you fill your reserves, you're going to go up to a half a tank, which is still not enough to build a successful practice or a successful life. Now I want you to look at the ideal reserves on the right, where your reserves are almost full. The interesting thing is, I live in Lake Tahoe. If you get in a boat and you drive around the perimeter of Tahoe, it's 72 miles. It's like looking at the lifestyles of the rich and famous on the water. What they didn't realize when they were building them, they were the head of Hewlett Packard or the head of IBM, or they're a hotshot orthodontist or an orthopod that's doing surgeries or a neurosurgeon over here, is what they were building was not this lifestyle of the rich and famous. What they were building is what we call a white hot imperative, because it's the white hot imperative that fills your reserves up. Now, Robert D. Hale said something interesting. He was an exceptionally successful business person, pilot, church leader. He was just one of those golfer, amazing people. He lost his health. In an interview, he was asked, how do you do it? How do you do it when you've been so successful and then you lost everything? His quote was this: when you cannot do what you've always done, then you only do what matters most. Now, for the purpose of our little presentation here, mattering most today is managing your reserves with a goal of becoming a resilient overcomer so that you can use the talents and abilities that God gave you to find and serve patients. So let's talk about managing these psychological reserves. I want you to look at these three graphics. The first one is a water skier in Lake Tahoe. Wish it was me, not nearly that good. Probably good like Dave Borges is. Dave Borges is a great water skier. Look at graphic number 2. Great skier. Certainly not me, but my kids are extremely good skiers. Look at how steep that slope is with the lake behind it. And then here we are at Pismo Beach, Seacrest Hotel, and I'm going to tell you what each of these mean, but this one I can do. A white hot imperative was developed by Leo Widener. If you Google it, there's somebody who interviewed me. There was a coaching client. She wrote a paper on it. She did a very good job about it. But the bottom line is it's a non-work activity. Think about the houses around the outside of Lake Tahoe that create passion that's interpreted, that increases your enthusiasm or your energy, that's then transferred into your practice, which increases your success. So when I was younger with little kids, it was water skiing. As I got older, raising my kids, it was snow skiing. Now my kids are older, they're on their own. We have grandkids, but it's Kim and I going to Pismo Beach and spending time at that Seacrest Hotel, golfing and goofing around, doing fun things. That's what fills my batteries. Think about those gauges. Now, the white hot imperative is a living thing. It changes as we age, and it changes with our circumstances. It helps us manage our reserves. It helps us live in the law of contribution. It helps us accomplish our purposes and goals. Now, John Rosenloff, one of the most brilliant men I know, hot CPA, did the books for the people who made the most money in the Central Coast, from my understanding, was a good friend of my wife's family. He read my entire program. This guy was uber successful. Read my entire program, and he goes, Jim, you've got so much good stuff in here. But the one thing you have that I don't have in my life is a white hot imperative. He said, I need to work on that. That was the missing thing in his life. Even though he was uber successful, he didn't have that energy in the tank to drive it and to be able to manage the burnout and the exhaustion. Now, where does the information from the white hot imperative come from? It comes from Leo Widener. Leo Widener actually developed the concept. I was the one who created the psychology involved in it so we can understand it. But Leo was the one who developed it. He looked at all these people, and Leo was the ultimate influencer of the influencers. He looked at all these people, and he looked at the ones that were doing well. And he found out that the ones that were doing well had an out-of-office passion that then transferred into the office. The ones that were not doing well went numb outside the office, and then they went to work and they tried to turn that into their passion, but it didn't give them the change in the tanks that we just looked at. So my studies of it focused on four things. Number one was anecdotally. What are people telling me about their white hot imperative? Number two was experientially. What are they experiencing with their white hot imperative? Number three, it was empirically. What did I observe? And then number four was, what's the research? Where can we show what happens when people have purpose, when people have meaning in their life? That's easy to determine. But where's the punch that's coming from outside the office that's giving that the life it needs to be successful? Here's what I found. Most of us have gone numb. We've turned off that switch. Sometimes it takes me years to help somebody determine what their white hot imperative is. What I tell them is start here. Ask somebody who loves you. Say so-and-so just came back. Whatever it is. Jim Naccarato, you ask Kim, my wife. Jim just came back full of passion, enthusiastic to the point where he was like gonna pop. Energy that would sustain him, not only throughout the day, but throughout the weeks, the things that were coming on him. What did he just get back from doing? Almost without exception, while we are very myopic, we're like one-eyed, we can only see part of it. The people who we love are binocular. They see the bigger picture. They can help us with that. This is a critical path item. The fifth thing is, okay, so now we've talked about some important things, but what about our spiritual reserves? This is one of the most neglected parts of practice building, and that is the importance of building our faith. Now, people will say, oh man, this guy is way into the spiritual part of practice building. Absolutely. I've done it for 36 years. I will tell you there is an undeniable difference between people who are rooted in their faith and people who are not. What's the difference? Well, it's bigger than belief or confidence. It's literally a principle of power. What power? The power to create meaningful work. Go back to our definition in the beginning. The power, the very power to create meaningful relationships. It's the very power to do what we need to do to have the best physical, emotional, and spiritual health possible. It's the power that we need to have true peace of mind, to have genuine self-worth, my relationship with me, which comes from my relationship with God, to have genuine self-esteem, and to have a great standard of living, get out of debt, and prepare for semi-retirement. Now, let's go to Russell Nelson. This guy was one of the finest cardiothoracic, however you say that, surgeons in the world. He was involved in developing the heart and lung machine. He had, if you think about all the tragedies went through in his life, all the tragedies, having 2 kids die of cancer, having his wife die, sitting next to him on the couch of a heart issue when he was home on a rare weekend. His is his statement. Faith is the power that enables the unlikely, I consider myself in that group, you may too, to accomplish the impossible. What was his impossible? In the midst of the greatest challenges in his life, he still did what he felt God expected him to do because he was on an assignment, and that assignment was rooted in his faith. What about Carl Jung? Let's talk about Carl Jung. One of the greatest minds in psychology, psychiatry, said faith is the force that bends reality. So what have I proven? I have proven that when our burden is heavy, when it feels overwhelming, when we don't have our mojo, we have to ask ourselves, now think about this from a success perspective. What have I been focusing on? I can guarantee you, almost without exception, you might have been focusing on other important things, but at that moment, you are not focusing on your faith. So the third step is don't retire. I get a lot of flack for this, a lot of flack. There's a bunch of money, like I said in the beginning, that's being made on trying to get you into work and then out of work. Look at the graphic on the left. Happy retirement. 2 people riding their bikes, happy, kicking their legs out, riding through the leaves, no worries. But what do we see? We see the guy on the right looking discouraged, going somewhere but doesn't know where he's going, asking himself, what is next in my life? Evidence Ken Isold is a writer for Psychology Today. He said the evidence is increasing that retirement is not good for you. Yes, it will decrease your stress. Yes, it will increase your freedom, but with time, you have an increased chance of 60% of being diagnosed with one or more significant physical diseases. People trade work for doing what? Going to the doctor. We want them to go to the doctor, but we want to stay healthy. We want them to stay healthy. People who stay healthy work. You have an increased chance of 40% of being clinically depressed. Now, I need to emphasize this point. I'm not talking about the blues. I'm talking about frank clinical depression. And anybody who has had that knows it's not just feeling off. It's a physiological change in your body that is so difficult to get above. You have 2 times the rate of cognitive decline. Now, the data is pointing towards Alzheimer's and dementia. You have an increased chance of early death of 50% by what they call all-cause mortality, equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day or having 6 alcoholic drinks a day because of a lack of purpose. So if you look up Michael Burt, hotshot guy, coach of the Greatness Factory, he said the word retire means to be taken out of use. You don't need rest. What you need is purpose. Now, here's the problem we have. We tell people we want to improve your life. We want to improve the length of your life, the quality of your life. So we say what? Clean up your diet, eat your vitamins, get some exercise, get your weight under control, work on your attitude, work on your sleep, get good, solid, high-quality health care. But then we look at the farmer who has almost every disease you know, that gets to bed early, gets up early, and we see him walking out, hobbling's better, to the tractor. And we ask him, what are you doing? He says, well, you see that field? We go, yeah, it needs to be plowed. You see those cattle or those cows? Yeah, they need to be milked. In other words, what the farmer has done is he realizes that no matter what's going on in his life, work is a great way to increase your longevity and your quality of life. Work is therapeutic. Now, here's the problem psychologically for most of us. We're fission or fusion. We're either 100% in or we're 100% out. We're either completely detached fission or we're completely attached. I am not in favor of that. Every single one of us, and I think this is a big push for concierge medicine and different things like that, should be coming up with a third alternative or a hybrid. A hybrid is semi-retirement. I am so convinced of this. I actually have people who are working very much into this. You work 3 half days a week, the first 3 weeks of the month. You take the fourth week off. You can bunch the weeks off. You can take the fourth week off 1 month and the first week of the next. You can travel. You do everything you want. You can add a significant amount of money to your retirement plan, whatever that is, your Social Security or investments, by staying in the game because you do what? You're not increasing your chance 60% of being diagnosed with one or more physical diseases. You're not dealing with the clinically depressed issue that goes up 40% if you're not working. Think about it. You sit around at home, what are you going to do? You're going to be thinking all the time about your problems. What do we know? We know an idle mind is what? It's the devil's playground. Nothing good comes out of it. But what we don't talk about is the perfect breeding ground for anxiety and depression. It's not good to have a bunch of free time. Everybody wants it until they get it. And then all of a sudden now they're sick, they're depressed, or, now you get the early death thing that factors in. I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to that work so hard to get out of work. And then once they were out of it, they were working not as hard, but very hard to try and find some work that they can do. Hence, go to a Walmart, go to a Costco, take the time, interview, go to a Taco Bell, go anywhere. Take the time and interview these people. You will be surprised at how many of them had great careers. And then they retired. They didn't have a way to go semi-retirement like doctors do. And so now they're just trying to find something to keep them busy. So semi-retirement, 3 half days a week, first 3 weeks of the month. We all need to be working towards that. So my hour is up. What I want to do, though, is just conclude with a couple of things. The first one is we have discussed the importance of success, and we discussed what happens if you're not successful. The second thing is we discussed Covey and how he said we've all got to humble ourselves, get out of the leaves, stop the cover-up psychology, and get into the roots. We talked about the critical roots, the connection, the purpose, the marriage, the work. We talked about the things that are important right now. And then we talked about the need to retire. Now, I am firmly convinced that as we went through this, some of you may have felt resistance. I say my data proves you resist what you need. The greater the resistance, the greater the need. But it's not just me. Carl Jung, again, one of the finest minds in psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry, said, what you resist not only persists, but it's going to grow in size. Now, I want to talk just for a minute, and I'm going to mute Clearfield so we can't come and jump in and talk about this, but I want to talk for just a minute about the Clearfield training program. Joe Montana said something interesting. He said, if you're really committed to excellence, find a performance coach who can help guide you to a higher level of achievement. Schwarzenegger, who you look at a guy who came from Austria with just a handful of goals and achieved them all, political, in Hollywood, and to be a bodybuilder, leading man in a movie and a bodybuilder, says this: you can call me anything in life, the Governator, the Terminator, the whatever, but never call me self-made. Never call me self-made. The people who go on to succeed have coaches. Now, Clearfield is probably one of the most humble people, and he won't talk about this. A lot of it is because of disclaimers and things like that. But what we know is people who make it to the top 20% have blind spots. It's not, when you have a coach help you, it's not a weakness, it's commitment to be successful. According to the International Coaching Federation study, it'll decrease your stress, increase your balance, increase your quality of life, increase your confidence, and increase the money you make. It doesn't cost you money, it makes you money. You've got to find somebody who has equal values or similar values. You've got to be coachable, and you can't try it out. You've got to stick with them. They got to be part of your team, because usually as you get to that point where you want to quit, it's usually when you're getting ready for a big breakthrough. Now, how does Clearfield fit in? Well, and I know he didn't want to talk about it, he has a phenomenal program that helps doctors on multiple levels, helps them from a coaching perspective. The things that we talked about today, he is outstanding in those things. Helps them from a medical perspective. He is a nationwide lecturer, and also helps them as a physician, where he does telemedicine and he helps people be healthy so they can achieve their success. So I know he doesn't want me talking about it, but I am telling you, he is a nationwide lecturer, highly in demand right now. And if I can say anything to pull this together, if you have any questions about anything that can help you with what we talked about today, I would give Clearfield a call and ask him about his program. So that's it for me. I have used up, I'm actually 15 minutes over time. And I don't know what you do for questions or answers, or if we just wrap it up, but I'm going to direct everything to Clearfield, actually. I'm going to put it all on him because he knows this stuff. And so if you have questions, he's a good person to ask. All right. So that's it for me. Are we done? Everybody good?
We're good.
We all
Hang
okay?
around for questions and answers though, Jim, or Q&A.
Okay. All right. We have any
Well,
questions?
first of all, the first question is, did I put you up to any of that?
No. In
Okay,
fact, I kind of
that was
rushed through
not
it because I knew
that
you
was
were going to, I
unsolicited.
know, and I knew you were going to mute me. I knew you would mute me because you will not talk about yourself. But there are people out there that need your help. So no, you did not put me up to it. So, okay.
Yeah. Can you
Next question.
yeah, can you how do we unshare your screen here though? That's the
Unshare it.
yeah, unshare
I
it
can go
so
stop
we can see
sharing.
each other. There we
Okay, there we go.
go. Okay, there we go.
All right.
Yes, I let everybody know that that was unsolicited. I did not put him up to that. And well, thank you for your kind words. None of it's true. um,
Not
but
true.
I don't know what to say. There's I don't even see any questions in the chat there. Does anybody have any questions or comments at all?
I have.
Yes.
So, Jim, that was awesome. That was great. The thing here is, as we as practitioners has now evolved ourselves, integrating it with technology. So this is
Sure.
where I've seen clinicians get into all of these tech, meaning all of these, even not only tech, but they have I guess interventions that they rely themselves on and they forget their own character as a clinician and now puts everything on a device and a treatment. How do you prevent that from happening? Because these treatments are taking your personality, taking the role of your doctorship. And then as you can see, you need to have strong foundations here. As you mentioned about the roots. These are the roots that we always need to protect to, but we get lost in that frame of our everyday lives that these boundaries are lost. And sometimes we go the
Right.
wrong direction. And how do you cope up with this? What do you advise clinicians and how to handle this?
Well, it's how would you answer that question?
For
You're in
me,
the trenches. Yeah, you're in
yeah.
the trenches. What would you suggest?
So my take on this is me as a clinician, I have to understand that my interventions does not fall into the hands of these inanimate objects, meaning a device, a hormone therapy, or even supplements that I give. As I perceive a practice grow, it grows with the clinician that's in there. You will hear that there because a practice is famous for, let's say, an IV specific IV therapy. But I don't believe that.
Right.
The real heart of a practice is the clinician themselves. And with the values that you instilled in your talk, that is the one that will make that practice grow. I mean, even though you have a revolving door of staff, they don't get familiarized with
Right.
patients. It's always the heart of the practice is you, and that's why relying on these tools that we have are just adjuncts, and they're not really going to move mountains for what you do. And even technology as it comes in and helps us in our practice, it's not gonna. It's only there's only a limit for it. But if a practitioner is there talking to their patients, sitting down eye level, heart to heart, that's where the healing starts. It's not because of a hormone therapy that, sure, I mean, physiologically, but again, it's not the hormone therapy, it's not the IV that you give. It's just you being there as a person, as a
Yeah.
doctor, and as a friend for them. And that builds healing.
And, that's perfectly said. That's the perfect answer. The question is, there's a movement in medicine to kind of distance ourselves from that. Like you're only as good as your technology, right? So there's that movement to convince practitioners that it's all about your technology, it's all about the test, it's all about the MRI, the CT, the whatever it is. And yet when you interview the patients, it's really exactly what you just said. It's the clinician. They're looking at the clinician and that sense of connection to determine whether or not they're going to stay, pay, and refer. That's a perfect answer. It's a great question and the perfect answer. And I'll tell you, the interesting thing is that it spreads out to the whole practice too. It's even your front desk person. I have the data where when people come in as a new patient, they pull out the red carpet, they make them feel very important. But then when they come in as a regular patient, there's so much distance in them that then the patients will say, I really like the doctor, but I'm never going back to that front desk person again. So you're right on the money. It is a relationship centric approach.
Well, one thing that stuck out with me, because I've been in practices before, I always hear the top brass or the people on top of the chain, the food chain, everybody's disposable. That's always what they kind of tell. I mean, they're not telling it to me. Everybody, it's a message that's being conveyed by the top people that who are not clinicians or just business owners. Because I worked in a facility that is owned by a business person and not a clinician. So when they say
Right.
that everybody's disposable, I'm thinking, sure, that's possibly true, but I don't know if you lose a good physician or a good doctor in this practice, they will take that group of patients that they have and they will bring it somewhere else. So if you think that's truth in terms of the wording, I think you should probably get into practice first to understand what you're saying. So I'm not, again, this is just me. I might be wrong. I'm not no business guy, but I think that quote is really not going to be applicable all the time.
Right. Right. Let me talk about one of my dear friends, Brent Rich. So Brent Rich he's an MD, he's an orthopedist, and very well known, highly accomplished, and trained residents or excuse me, fellows, and has worked with big teams. I don't want to pick on any teams here, but I remember I was talking to him one day, and he talked about how when a player got hurt, he would go to their home to stitch them up. If a player had something happen, he would go to their home to make sure that they're okay. He said that it was interesting too, because he would talk about people who needed surgeries and how, there's this kind of group of people that come together and you're supposed to refer. But he had such integrity that he couldn't do that. If somebody had a knee problem, say they're a hot shot college football player, he had to get him to the best knee guy. If somebody had a shoulder problem, he didn't have to get to the one in rotation. He'd have to get him to the best shoulder guy. And I remember looking at him and thinking, God bless you for the effort that you're putting into being a real doctor, is taking care of real patients that have real conditions, even when it isn't convenient. And I have never heard anyone say anything other than fantastic remarks about how he was their doctor. They never talk about the MRI. They never talk about the CT scan. They never talk about the injections. They talk about Brent Rich. He's their doctor. And I'm going to say that that's what people are yearning for today. Now, I've seen that in Brent and I've seen it in Clearfield. I've been in Clearfield's office. I've seen the way he works with his patients. Yes, he's brilliant. Yes, he has all this information, but I watch people walk in one way, walk out almost as if they're 6 inches taller, not because of what he did for them from a medical perspective, but because he established his connection. I'm saying, to me, that's the future of medicine. Patients are tired of being treated like a number. In fact, if we had time, I've got all the slides that prove this. Back to the early 1900s, the good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the person who has the disease. There's a massive amount of information on that.
I have three cute little stories about to relate to what you first said. The first one, when I was a resident, we had a family practice clinic in the morning, and then we had specialty clinics in the afternoon. And I was with dermatology, and I was running really late. And I got there like an hour after I was supposed to be there, and I'm apologizing to the attending physician, and what's he going to do to me? He's going to write me up, and he says to me, he goes, "Nobody cares. So you're late. So what? Nobody cares." So I
Yeah.
looked at him incredulously. What do you mean nobody cares? We're here. Like we're doing God's work. He goes, "Nobody cares. You were late. So what?"
Yeah.
But life goes on. Number two, um, so I was finishing my residency. I was looking for a job. I wanted to go to California. I'm in Northeast Pennsylvania. My bride at the time didn't want to go that far away from her mother, so I was looking for a job. And in our town, this is in 1982. The old World War II veteran doctors were, near the end of their rope, and some of them were hanging on. One of them was he was the head of the ER at the hospital where we had our residency. He couldn't read a cardiogram, by the way. He used to send them up to us residents to read the cardiogram. Somebody came in with chest
Oh,
pain. He
wow.
couldn't. He was the head of the ER. He had a full practice. He was delivering babies. He's 80 years old. He came into the ER one night. I was on call. He has chest pain, has a heart attack, and he dies. So he's got a full
Oh,
practice. His practice was in his house. 2 days later, the head of the residency and his wife call me and say, "We have all these patients. We don't know what to do with them. You're almost done your residency." So they've made an arrangement that I could take over his practice. I went on at 6 o'clock. I worked all day as a resident, and they let me go early, an hour early. And then from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night for the last 3 months of my residency, I went over to his office, which became my office, and I ran his practice and I delivered his babies. And they loved this. Oh, you said
wow.
everybody, they loved this guy. He walked on water. He was the greatest doctor on earth. And I knew he couldn't even read a cardiogram, right? But no, no, Dr. H, I won't mention his name. Dr. H, he was the greatest.
Yeah. Can I just read, because I want to go back?
Yeah.
Melvin, can I call you Melvin?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are you okay, Melvin? Do you
Yeah,
remember? Okay. Jim. Okay, good, good. So let me just dovetail off of what Bill just said here. I just want to read a couple of statistics that prove exactly the answer you gave is right. Think about my friend Brent Rich. Think about Clifford. Think about these people you know that do this. So in 1990, Medical Economics, big thick book, Encyclopedia of Practice and Financial Management, said your success is based on how you treat patients while you're treating them. In the early 1900s, so let's go back in time, there was this guy named William Osler. He was an MD, kind of looked at sometimes as the father of medicine. He was the one who said the good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. In 2020, there was a study done by Anthony Orsini. I think he was a neonatal researcher or something, osteopath. He said patients need to feel seen and heard and know they're more than just a number. Carl Jung said, know all the theory, again, bright minds, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. Thomas S. Monson said, and this kind of pulls it all together, never let a problem to be solved become more important than a person to be loved. I'm going to say that's the future of medicine in my mind. And that's a great example. You gave a great answer for that. So I just wanted to, I found that data plate and I wanted to make sure that I read that so that you guys had that.
So, okay, Dr. Nario, got anything to wrap up?
No, that was amazing.
Okay.
Then Jim, you kind of touched the heart of the practice that is not being spoken of in our I guess webinars.
Mhm.
That this is the heart of a practice, and everybody kind of neglects that because we always think about the science and the income that we need to create from this. But thank you for touching on that, and hopefully
Yeah.
our clinicians here gets the message and applies it in their everyday.
Right. Okay, Jim, you get the last word. Any summary? Any last words? Leave them. You want to leave them singing the theme song as they leave the theater.
No, I'm good. Thank you for the privilege. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.